Chapter 6 The Time-Space Machine. Roger Little's laboratory was illumined by a single bluish lamp embedded in the concrete of its sunken floor. An infinite diversity of mechanisms lined the walls and sprawled their precise lengths on long tables and dangled eerily from hooks set in the high domed ceiling. Mechanisms aglitter in blue-lit seclusion, a strange, bizarre foreglimpse into the alchemy and magic of a far-distant future, with spheres and condensers and gleaming metal rods in lieu of stuffed crocodiles and steaming elixirs. All of the contrivances were arresting, but one was so extraordinary in size and complexity that it dominated the others and riveted Algernon's attention. He seemed unable to drag his gaze from the thing. It was a strange agglomeration of metallic spheres and portions of spheres, of great bluish globes surrounded by tiny clusters of half-globes and quarter-globes, whose surfaces converged in a most fantastical way, and from the globes there spotted, at grotesque angles, metallic crescents and converging tips. To Algernon's excited imagination, the thing wore a quasi-reptilian aspect. "It's like a toad's face," he muttered, "bulbous and bestial." Little nodded. "It's a triumph of mechanized ugliness, isn't it? Yet it would have been defied in ancient Greece, by Archimedes especially. He would have exalted it above all his coinoids and parabolas." "What function does it perform?" asked Algernon. "A sublime one. It's a time-space machine, but I'd rather not discuss its precise function till I've shown you how it works. I want you to study its face as it waxes on non-Euclidean. When you've glimpsed a fourth-dimensional figure, you'll be prepared to concede, I think, that the claims I make for it are not extravagant. I know of no more certain corrective for an excess of skepticism. I was the critique of pure reason personified, until I looked upon a skin sphere. Then I grow very humble, reverent toward the great suspected. Watch now." He reached forward, grasped a switch, and with a shift, downward movement of his right arm, set the machine in motion. At first the small spheres of the crescents resolved quickly, and the large spheres slowly. Then the large spheres literally spun, while the small spheres lazed. Then both small and large moved in unison. Then the spheres stopped altogether, but only for an instant, while something of movement seemed to flow into them from the revolving crescents. Then the crescents stopped, and the spheres moved, all in varying tempo, faster and faster, and their movement seemed to flow back into the crescents. Then both crescents and spheres began to move in unison, faster and faster and faster, until the entire mass seemed to merge into a shape paradoxical, outrageous, unthinkable. A sphenoid with a non-Euclidean face, a geometric blasphemy that was at once isosceles and equilateral, was both convex and the concave. Algernon stared on in horror. "What in God's name is that?" "You are looking on a fourth-dimensional figure," said Little most soothingly. "Be steady now." For an instant nothing happened. Then a light, greenish, blinding shot from the center of the crazily distorted figure streamed across the opposite wall, lining on the smooth cement a perfect circle. But only for a second was that wall illumined. With a rough movement, Little shot the lever upward, and its radiance dimmed and vanished. Another moment, and that wall would have crumbled away, he spoke. With fascination, Algernon watched the outrageous spheroid grow indistinct, watched it blur, then disappear, amidst a resurgence of spheres. "That light," cried Little exultantly, "will send Chog-Nar-Thon back through time. It'll reverse its decadent randomness, disincarnate and disembody it, and send it back forever." "But I don't understand," murmured Algernon. "What do you mean by randomness?" "I mean that this machine can work havoc with entropy." There was a ring of exultation in Little's voice. "Entropy?" Algernon scowled. "I'm not sure that I understand. I know that entropy is in thermodynamics, of course, but I'm not sure—" "I'll explain," spoke Little. "You are, of course, familiar with the ABCs of Einsteinian physics, and aware that time is relatively errorless, that the sequence in which we view events in nature is not a cosmic actuality, and that our conviction that we are going somewhere in time is a purely human illusion conditioned by our existence upon this particular planet and the limitations which our five senses impose upon us. We divide our time into past, present, future. But in reality, an event sequence in time depends wholly upon the position in space from which it is viewed. Events which occurred thousands of years ago on this planet haven't as yet taken place to a hypothetical observer situated billions and billions of light-years remote from us. Thus, cosmically speaking, we cannot say of an event that it has happened and will never happen again, or that it is about to happen and has never happened before, because before to us is after to intelligences situated elsewhere in space-time. But though our familiar time divisions are purely arbitrary, there is omnipresent in nature a principle called entropy, which, as Eddington pointed out, equips time with a kind of empirical arrow. The entire universe appears to be running down. It is the consensus of astronomical opinion that suns and planets and electrons are constantly breaking up, becoming more and more disorganized. Billions of years ago, some mysterious dynamic, which Sir James Jean has likened to the finger of God, streamed across primeval space and created the universe of stars in a state of almost perfect integration, welded them into a system so highly organized that there was only the tiniest manifestation of the random element anywhere within it. The random element in nature is the uncertain element, the principle which brings about disorganization, disintegration, or decay. Let us suppose that two mechanical men, robots, are tossing a small ball to and fro, to and fro. The process may go on indefinitely, for the mechanical creatures do not tire, and there is nothing to make the ball swerve from its course. But now let us suppose that a bird in flight collides with the ball, sends it spinning, so it misses the hand of the receiving robot. Well, what happens? Both robots begin to behave grotesquely. Missing the ball, their arms sweep empty through the air, making wider and wider curves. Maybe they staggered forward and collapse into each other's arms. The random, the uncertain element has entered their organized cosmos, and they have therefore ceased to function. This tendency of the complex to disintegrate, or the perfectly balanced to run amok, is called entropy. It is entropy that provides time with an arrow, and disrupting nebula plays midwife to the birth of planets, from star wombs most incalculable. It is entropy that cools the great orbs, harder than Betelgeuse, more fiery than Arcturus, through all the outer vastness, reducing them to sterility, to whirling motes of simple chaos. It is the random element that is slowly breaking up, destroying the universe of stars in an ever-widening circle, with an ever-increasing malignancy. If one may ascribe malignancy to a force, or a tendency, it works its awful havoc. It is analogous to a grain of sand dropped into one of the intrinsics of a vast and intricate machine. The grain creates a small disturbance, which in turn creates another disturbance, a larger and larger, and so on ad infinitum. And with every event that has occurred on this earth since its departure from the sun, there has been an increase of the random element. Thus we can legitimately place events in time. Events which occurred tens of thousands of years ago may be happening now to intelligences situated elsewhere. An event still in the offing, so to speak, may exist already in another dimension of space-time. But if any earth event is very disorganized and very decadent in its contours, even a hypothetical distant observer would know it has occurred very late in the course of cosmic evolution, and that a series of happier events, with less of the random element in them, must have preceded it in time. In brief, that sense of time's passing which we experience in our daily lives is due to our intuitive perception that the structure of the universe is continuously breaking down. Everything that happens, every event, is an objective manifestation of matter's continuous and all-pervasive decay and disintegration. Algernon nodded. I think I understand, but doesn't that negate all that we have been taught to associate with the word evolution? It means that not advancement, but an inherited generation has characterized all the processes of nature from the beginning of time. Can we then apply it to man? Do you mean to suggest? Little shrugged. One can only speculate. It may be that medieval theology wasn't so very wrong after all. That old Augustine and the angelic doctor and Abelard and the others surmised correctly. Maybe man was once akin to the angels, and that he joined himself to nature's decay through a deliberate rejection of heaven's grace. It may be that by some mysterious and incomprehensibly perverse act of will he turned his face from his Maker, and let the evil pour in upon him, made of him a magnet for all the malevolence that the cosmos does hold. There may have been more than a little truth in Ormond's identification of Cognar with the Lucifer of medieval myth. Is this, exclaimed Imbert reproachfully, a proper occasion for a discussion of theology? It isn't, Little acknowledged. But I thought it desirable to ascertain certain possibilities. I don't want you to imagine that I regard the intrusion of Cognar Fawn into our world as a scientifically explicable occurrence in a facilely dogmatic sense. Well, I don't care how you two regard it, affirmed Algernon, so long as you succeed in destroying it utterly. I am a profound agnostic as far as religious concepts are concerned, but the universe has mysteries enough to justify divergent speculations on the part of intelligent men as to the ultimate nature of reality. I quite agree, Little spoke. I was merely pointing out that modern science alone has very definitive limitations. And yet you propose to combat this horror with science? Exclaimed Imbert. With a concrete embodiment of the concepts of transcendental mathematics, corrected Little. And such concepts are merely empirically scientific. I am aware that science may be loosely defined as a systemized accumulation of tendencies and principles. But classically speaking, its prime function is to convey some idea of the nature of reality by means of inductive logic. Yet our mathematically physicist has turned his face from induction as resolutely as did the medieval scholars in the days of the troubadour. He insists that we must start from the universal assumption that we can never know positively the real nature of anything, and that whatever truth we may deduce from empirical generalities will be chiefly valuable as a kind of, mystical guidepost. at best merely roughly indicating of the direction in which we are traveling, but withal something of a sacrament, and therefore superior to the dogmatic knowledge of 19th century science. The speculations of mathematical physicists today are more like poems and psalms than anything else. They embody concepts wilder and more fantastic than anything in Poe or Hawthorne or even Blake. Little stepped forward and seized the entropy-reversing machine by its most globular neck. 2 men can carry it very easily, he spoke, as he lifted it a foot from the floor by way of experiment. We can train it on Chagna Fawn from a car. If it keeps to the open streets, interrupted Algernon. We can't follow it up a fire escape or into the woods in a car. I thought of that. It could hide itself for days in Central Park, or Inwood, or Van Cortlandt Park, or even the wider stretches of a woodland a little farther to the north, but still close to the city. But we won't cross that bridge till we come to it. His expression was tense, but he spoke with quiet deliberation. We could dispense with the car in an emergency. 2 men could advance fairly rapidly with the machine upon a smooth expanse. Well, we must make haste, he continued after a moment's thought. It's my chauffeur's day off, but I'll take a taxi down to the garage. I will get the car myself. He turned to Algernon. If you want to help, locate Chagna Fawn. Algernon started. But how? He gasped. It shouldn't be difficult. Get in touch with the police, Assistance and Ambulance Division. Ask if they've received an unusually urgent call. Anything of a sensitive nature. If Chagna has slain again, they would be the one to know about it. He pointed urgently toward a phone in the corner and strode from the laboratory.